Hey filmmakers, this is Carrie with Filmmaker Central, and today we're going to do a introduction to Fusion. There's so many new people out there getting into Davinci Resolve who don't even know what the Fusion page is all about, and we're going to get into it and show you some basic things that you can do, and then we'll start building on that in later videos. But in essence, Fusion is to Resolve what After Effects is to Premiere. And that, I mean, Fusion is a visual effects engine. So you can do all kinds of visual effects. You can do 3D rendering, you can do motion effects, you can do particle effects, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. You want to simulate fire or rain or snow, or you want to just do animated titles, or there's just so many things that you can do in Fusion. This is what takes Davinci Resolve from just being a video editor to being a complete production suite. So, well, let's just get into it. And I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do with Fusion. All right, down at the bottom of the screen, we have our media page, our cut page, edit, Fusion, color, Fairlight, and deliver. Now, the 2 or 3 that you may not use a lot, the edit page is obviously for editing. The cut page, well, let's start at the beginning. The media page, which is where we manage our media, we import, we optimize, we can generate proxies, we can trim clips that we have. The media is for managing media. The cut page is for really fast getting started with a project. You can put your clips together very quickly and then move over the timeline for more advanced editing. And in the edit page, there's a lot of things you can do, especially with the new version 17. There's just a ton of new things that you can do, including green screening, stabilization. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do in edit besides just editing the footage. The next screen is Fusion, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video, all the special effects that we can do. The color page, which is what we see right here, which is allows us to color grade, manipulate the look of the footage. Fairlight is a very, very advanced audio processing and editing system. You can do all kinds of cool things with mixing of surround sound and just tons of effects, all kinds of cool things you can do in Fairlight. And then the deliver page where we do our export. So I'm going to start on the timeline here. I'm going to go to the end because we may get back to some of this stuff here in a moment. But we're going to do something really basic. And I'm going to go to effects. And if you don't see this over here, go up to the top, click your effects library. I'm going to actually close the media pool. And there's the effects library. We're going to go to effects. And we're going to drag a Fusion composition into place here. I'm going to click here and increase the size so that we can kind of see what we're working with. So a Fusion composition just sits on the timeline like any other piece of footage. Now with that selected, we are going to go to the Fusion page. And this is just kind of your blank canvas here. Now, depending on your layout, it's probably going to look similar to this, depending on what options you have open. You can open the media pool, inspector, media, keyframes. There's a lot of different things we can do in here, but I'm going to keep things fairly simple. We do want to turn on the inspector in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we're going to do some of our settings. I'm going to turn off my media pool because we don't need that. And you have your effects library here, but we don't really need this, and I'll show you why in a moment. Down here on the bottom, it's going to start with Media Out 1. And what the Media Out 1 is, this is the final output that we're going to see back on the timeline. Well, we don't see anything on here because we haven't done anything. Let's start with something super simple. Now, you can scroll through the tools over here. You can whip through all these. My favorite way of doing things is to just hit Shift Space. So yeah, I'm going to close this window again because it came up on a second screen. If I hit Shift Space, I get the select tool, and then I can start typing something in. So let's try just text. And I'm going to add a text node. So this is all done in what's called nodes. So we have these different boxes here that give us our special or different effects. And we can tie these together in different ways. So if I just go from this text box to my media out, now we see that there's some kind of output over here. And you see these little boxes at the bottom of the nodes. This tells you which of the two screens on top that node is being displayed in. So our text node doesn't have anything on there. So I'm going to hit the 1 key. So we can, that's what's going to display over here. The media out is going to display over here. I've got the text mode selected, and I'm going to put my first title. If I can spell right. Now it looks the same in both because there's really no difference between the output in these. Now I can grab that handle on top, drag it to where I want, and really that's it. We've got a title. It doesn't do anything, but if we come over to our timeline, yep, we have a title here. And if I put this, oops, I'm on the deliver page. Scroll to the end. If I take this title and I put it over some footage, yeah, we've created a title. So this is its most basic form of things, is just to kind of composite some different pieces together to make a final output. So let's walk through some of the things that I would normally do. And a lot of the stuff I do is titles. So let's get into a few tools to see what all we can do. So I'm going to go back to the Fusion page. So I do have my title here. And let's say I just want a box underneath. So let's take this from being just a simple title to an animated title. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to put a shape on there. We're going to bend it a little bit, put the text on top of it, and see what we have. So I'm going to use a shape 3D. So I can hit Shift Space and type that in, or I have a shortcut up here for shape 3D. And I'm going to hit 1 so I see it over in the box over there. And we can come over here to the inspector and play around with that. So we can have our material. I'm just going to change the color, and I'll just make it a blue. Maybe in here, get a nice dark blue color. Okay, and we're not seeing it on the output because I haven't connected this to anything yet. And I'm going to go to the transform, and I want to size it. So right now I just have this big box right there. And if I uncheck this lock XYZ, now I can control it in different parameters. So I don't really have any depth on it here. So the Z isn't going to do anything. The X is going to be my width. My Y is going to be my height. So we're looking good right there. Now, because this is a shape, I can't connect it to a 2D shape because Fusion can work in either 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. Shape 3D is a 3-dimension tool. So it's not going to do all the same things as a 2-dimensional like the text was. So we're going to have to do some things to mix these up a little bit. So with the shape 3D selected, I'm going to hit Shift Space, which brings up my tool palette. And I'm going to do a renderer 3D. Now this is going to allow this to render that 3D shape into a 2D shape. Now from here, I want to mix this 2D text to the 3D text. So to do that, I'm going to merge them. So I'm going to hit Shift Space, bring up my toolbox, merge. All right. See how when I move the mouse over this line here, it turns blue. If I click on that, it's going to delete that. And I'm going to grab this output from the text and drop it onto the merge. take that merge and go to the media out. Oh, look, now I have my two pieces together. We're getting somewhere, right? I'm going to select my shape 3D, and now I have my control points on here that I can move. I can also do it over here. As I move this, watch this translation over here. So you can see how I could just type in the number up here if I wanted, but as I just move these, you can see it change in that translation area. Oh, look at that. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Let's go back to our timeline on the edit page. Look, we have our first colored title. So now we're starting to get somewhere. It's starting to look like a real title, but it's not very clean yet. Let's fix it up just a little bit. So we're here in our shape, and one of the things I like is having a little shape to my shape, I guess you will. So from the shape 3D, let's go up here so I can show you that you can search. If you kind of know the name of something, you can type it up in here, take that node and bring it down, and see how it kind of connected there. I'm going to undo that. If I'm dragging this around and I hold the shift key, as I put that onto one of the lines, it will add it in there. Now still, we haven't seen anything happen because we haven't put any parameters on this bender tool. So I'm going to come up here to my inspector. Let's change this to shear. And oh, look at that. If I move the shear, I actually get it to kind of shear in one direction. That's starting to look kind of cool. And I'm going to use my translation and kind of shift things over a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Select my text and just kind of center it a little bit. All right, that's looking pretty cool. Let's go back to our shape and look at some of the different things we can do. So translation is going to allow it to move left, right, up, down, back, forth. Rotation, of course, is going to rotate it. Pivot is going to decide where it pivots. So if I'm rotating it, by default, that pivot is going to be in the middle. I can change that pivot to be at the beginning or at the end or anywhere else if I need that pivot point to be something different. Scaling is going to allow us to size it in different ways. Right now, I think it's probably a little too tall there. So let's just shrink it up a little bit with our y-axis. All right, it's starting to look pretty cool there. Now, we always have different controls up here. Let's go back to our controls. We have our shape. What kind of shape is it? Well, I used a plane, which is kind of the default. You have cubes, spheres, cylinders, cones, toruses, and icos. Visibility, let's just kind of go through here. Is it visible or not? Well, I can turn that off, make it not visible. And when you see these little diamonds over here, these are keyframes. So I can have it not visible at some point and then become visible somewhere else on the timeline. Unseen by cameras, if we were using cameras. So there's quite a bit of features in here. Lighting, is it affected by lights? So if we add lights to our 3D scene, we can control how the light affects that shape. Is it a shadow caster? Meaning if I have certain types of lights, will that shape in there create a shadow behind it? Or is it a shadow receiver? Meaning if I have an object in front of it that's getting hit with light that is a shadow caster, will that shadow appear on this shape? 3D lighting is pretty cool. And I'll put a link up above for a video that I did a while back on using 3D lights. It's pretty cool. So check that out as well. Is it a matte? Our blend modes, depending on how we're doing things, do we need it to blend in with something else? Normals and tangents, really don't get into that too much. Our object ID, if we need to change the object ID for direct calling it from somewhere else. Materials, of course, we just did the color. Specular highlights, transmittance, does it receive light? or shadows again on here. Material ID, if we have a set of materials that we're using, because we could make this look like concrete or steel or all kinds of things. The transform, again, the movement, rotation, pivot, and scaling. And settings, there really isn't much in settings for most things. You can have different render scripts in here. Again, very advanced stuff, so we're not going to deal with that. We're going to just keep to the basics for this video. Our bender, we'll go to that one, and as you saw, we had the shear, bend. Go ahead and we'll just try some of these things so you can see what they do. So bending, it's kind of hard to see in here, but it's actually kind of making it a tube shape. So not really something that we want for this one. Taper, so we could use this as well instead of the shear. So it just kind of does things a little bit different. Instead of kind of shifting everything in one direction, it does it like top to bottom, left, right. So this is just another way of doing the same thing. Twist. Twist can be fun. You can see how the twisting works there. And a lot of these controls, you see this little dot right underneath it. That was the default setting. So if I click on that, it takes it right back to where it was. And let's just go back to taper, and we'll give our little cutout on the side there. Our renderer 3D mode, this defines how things are rendered. Are we using a software renderer, OpenGL renderer? And there's differences between these that some will do handle things in a different way. So sometimes you need to select a different renderer. Our output channels, this is RGB and alpha, so that's kind of the normal, but we can say how we want this to be output. Lighting, do we want to enable lighting? Well, I turned it on, but there's no lights, so it turns black. Am I going to enable shadows on it? Well, I could, but there's no lights to cast shadows. Images, if we had full frame images, fields, or reversed fields, I can add kind of overlays of images in here. And again, settings, there's a few extra settings in here. Motion blur, sometimes that's handy to get things to look right. And our merge. We definitely need to talk about the merge tool. So the merge allows us to select where it's at, the angle, can we flip it, application modes, kind of your blending modes there, operators, subtractive or additive, alpha gain, burn in, blending, how we want the edges, what filter method. There's quite a bit of stuff in here. Here's our different channels. We can set our depth merge, foreground offset. I mean, again, lots and lots of interesting tools. But let's talk about the basics of the merge. What the merge does is it takes two 2D objects and combines them together. Pretty simple in concept. And it has, we'll mouse over this one. So the green is the foreground, the yellow is the background. This little blue one here is an effect mask, so we could create a mask for the effect to happen. And then over here, this square is our output. So the merge is a very powerful tool, and we're going to use this a lot. If I want to use let's go ahead and add another text layer. So let's hit Shift Space. Again, my select tool comes up on a different screen. Text. I'm going to add this text in here, and I'm going to put subtitle text. All right, now we need to get these two to kind of talk to each other. So I'm going to disconnect from the merge, connect these two, and you see when I did that, it created a merge of those two because everything has to be merged together. Any 2D object that you're putting together has to have a merge node. And we're going to go from this merge node to that merge node. So I'm going to take my first text there. I'm going to move it up a little bit. take my second text node, bring it down, and slide it into place. Of course, it's a little big here, so we'll go over to our text tools, and I'll just change the size. And there we go. We have a 2-line text box. We're starting to make some progress here. So now we have a 2-line text. I mean, we can definitely clean this up a little bit. I'll just make this a little bit smaller. Reposition it. And then let's go back to our shape tool. And remember, we're going to go to transform and scale it. So we're just going to scale this up a little bit. And you see it went a little higher on the top than the bottom. So I'll come over to the other monitor and just adjust things. It's looking super good here. We are making some progress. Alrighty. Now, let's animate this. We want it to slide in and then slide out. So if you recall, what we've been talking about in several of these pieces here is to move something around, we transform it. And we want to transform the entire thing. So that's going to be after our final merge node. So I'll come up here to my tools and I'll type in transform. I'll bring this into place and I'll hold down Shift and drop it into place. All right, so far so good. Now up here is our timeline, and the red line here is where we're at in the timeline. These yellow ones are the beginning and the end. So I'm going to go to the beginning, and I want this to go to about 25 frames. So just for easy math here. So 25 frames is going to be 1 second. And on the transform, what do we have? We have our center position, our pivot, our sizing, aspect, angle, flip, edges, filter methods. And all I want to do is control where it's at. Now, this is where I want it to be at the 1 second point. So I'm going to click on that diamond. That sets a key point, or a waypoint there. A keyframe. It sets a keyframe. Probably shouldn't do videos first thing in the morning. Now I'm going to move my red cursor here, or my red line here, to the beginning, and just go and I'm going to move everything. So I can do it from the tool up here, or I could do it from the center point under transform if you look in the upper right hand corner. And I'm just going to move this off screen. Excellent. Now I'm going to copy this just as a reference, and I want that to be on the, well, let's play it. Let's show you how it looks like. Boom, it slides into place. Excellent. Now we want that same timing on the end. So we have 149 frames here. We want to go back 25. So that'd be 124. And again, we're going to set a keyframe here just by clicking on the diamond. We're going to go to the end, and just to keep the speed the same, I'm going to paste in the value that we had at the beginning. All right, let's go to the beginning of our timeline here, hit play. It comes in, sits on the screen for a few seconds, and then slides out. Super cool. All right, we're really getting somewhere here. Now let's go back to our timeline. Now what you'll see up here very, very often is this red line in the timeline that's turning blue. This is doing a pre-render of that footage, and that was fast. I love the MacBook Pro M1 and the Mac Mini M1 with Davinci Resolve. They're super fast. So it's ready to play. We're going to hit play here. Our title slides in and then slides out. So hopefully that gave you kind of a quick little insight into like creating an animated title with Fusion. Let's dig in, and I'm just going to show you a few other things that Fusion can do since you're still here watching me. Right. I'm just going to go to effects. I'm going to grab the Fusion composition, drop a new one in place, make sure it's selected, and I'm going to go to the Fusion page. Now, instead of sitting here and creating all kinds of crazy stuff, I'm going to go to templates. And under our templates, we have a bunch of stuff that's already done. And I'm just going to, let's just grab something here, the blowing leaves. Now look what it's done. It's added all these nodes in here that are going to do something. We have a P emitter. This is a particle emitter. It's going to emit some type of shape onto the screen. P directional force. What direction is it? Is the wind blowing? Turbulence. We'll create a turbulence in it. Vortex, kind of a spinning thing. P render. It's going to render those particles. A 3D camera, so we can position where the camera is in relative to those particles. A merge 3D, very similar to a merge, but for 3D objects. Our renderer 3D, and then from there, we'll go to our media out. Excellent. We'll click to go to the beginning here, and we'll hit play, and we have blowing leaves. So very cool stuff that is built in here. So if you're doing a little fall footage scene, add these blowing leaves into it. This stuff to me is so exciting. So I'm going to delete those, and bubbles going to be very similar. We have a P emitter. I mean, all the ones we're looking at are going to have P emitters, turbulence, the spawn ratio, brightness and contrast, flock controls the kind of the behavior of them, directional force again, our renderer, our merge 3D, our camera, and our renderer. And I don't need to go to media out to show this. Remember, I have this little piece here on the bottom. It's not on any one of the displays. Well, if I just hit 1, now it's putting this output onto the display 1, and I'll go ahead and hit play. And we have 3D bubbles. Not sure where I would use those 3D bubbles anywhere, but what's cool is you can dig through these things, these templates, and figure out how some of this stuff was done. And that's what I think is super, super cool about Fusion, is you want to learn something, you can. And let's kind of dig through this one. Here we've got a shape 3D with an emitter on the other side. We have an ellipse shape, which is kind of an oval. Fast noise, which is a way of just creating some randomness. Shape 3Ds, another emitter over there. You got turbulence on both of them, directional force on both of them, renderers on both, a merge node, our renderer, adding a little soft glow to it. And let's see what this guy does. Wow. So this burning engine, you can see, is kind of chunking on this machine. This is a heavy duty scene here. So if you're trying to do like this burning plasma effect type thing, this is going to work really cool. And you can modify it to suit your particular needs. But yeah, it's not playing super, super fast on this MacBook Pro M1 just because this is a very intense special effect. I'll get rid of that. Embers, very similar to the blowing leaves. Fireflies, fireworks. Let's take a look at fireworks. So I'll drop this in place here. Again, we have some new controls here. This is a cannon, the friction, spawn, turbulence, fireworks, our renderer. Now, this cannon is a P emitter. It just was renamed for convenience. We'll go ahead and hit 1 on here, and we'll hit play. Well, let's go to the beginning and hit play. Boom. Pretty fireworks. Look at that. Now you'll notice it's not the same every time. Even though I'm just playing and repeating, it's not exactly the same because there's some randomness built into this. Flash bulbs, doing a kind of a paparazzi effect. Now, see how this one was different. Instead of having all those different nodes, this is just this one thing here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And now we can see what this does. It creates this flash bulb effect. But why is this one different from those other ones when it's just a single node here? Well, if you notice, there's these different lines. This looks like some effects that are stacked up on top of each other because this is a group. If I double click on it, this is where we can see what's happening. Again, we have a P emitter, some turbulence, a renderer, a camera, the renderer 3D, a highlighter, and a color correction. Because if you look, there's like it goes from white to kind of this orangey color in there. So you can take a set of nodes and group them together just to make it easier to deal with, because sometimes you can have a lot of nodes on the screen. So we'll get rid of that. We'll delete those. And let's take a look at the smokestack. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the smokestack here. Again, we're just in these templates of particles, so they're all going to look similar. A rectangle, fast noise, brightness and contrast, a particle emitter, particle turbulence, renderer, a camera, a merge, and then a renderer 3D. I'll hit 1 to show it over here on the right-hand display. And as the smoke is pretty heavy duty because there's a ton of particles to make up smoke, and you can see that bogged down a little bit on this MacBook Pro M1. But this is a great example of what realistic smoke looks like, and you can modify this for your own project. So again, a great way of learning how some of this stuff works. Steam, whoops, whoa, I double clicked it and put it in here. So again, very similar to the smoke, right? It looks very, very similar, but in this case, instead of it coming from one spot, this is just going to kind of fill the screen here. Oh, but let's kind of do something really crazy here. Where's my media out? It's way over here. I'm going to grab this and bring it over here. Connect this so it actually is going to go on our output. Go to our timeline. I'm going to drop it in on top of my footage. This may take a while. But actually, look, it's going really fast. This is real-time rendering. So I didn't speed this clip up at all for you to see what it was like. So let's go ahead and play this. And we have some steam over on top of our footage. So some really neat stuff in Fusion. And we're going to get into more and more Fusion stuff in the weeks ahead. But I wanted to give you kind of a basic understanding of what Fusion is and some of the things you can do. Now I'm going to go back and let's just kind of browse through the tools very quickly just to get you a little bit more familiar with some of the things. All right, we're going to go to our Fusion page. I'll have that Steam selected. We'll go to our Fusion page, and under Tools, so there's a lot of tools in here. We have different types of light: ambient light, directional light, point light, spotlight. Now, spotlight is the only one that can cast shadows. So others are going to be able to light different scenes and things, but only the spotlight will create shadows. Materials, blends, channel booleans, cook torrents. I don't even know what some of these things are. Material merges, fongs, reflections, stereo mix, wards. Wards help with kind of shaping of things. Bump maps, catchers, cube maps, fall off, fast noise texture, gradients, sphere maps, texture 2Ds, texture transforms. And under 3D, we have our camera 3D, our Bender 3D, displacement maps, point clouds, projectors. Again, what you can do in here is really limited by your own imagination. Where we've only been using the 2D text, there is a 3D text, so you can give it some depth. transform 3D, triangulate 3D, different blur things, blur, defocus, directional blurs, sharpens. Color tools. So sometimes when you're working with footage, your color correction needs to be done in Fusion because of the workflow. If we look at the bottom of the screen, this is how things flow through Davinci Resolve. We import our footage, we do our cuts, we go to our timeline, we add our effects, and then we do color correction. So if I'm working with ungraded footage in here, and then I go to my color correction, I could end up changing the colors of some special effects depending on how I had things linked together. So kind of need to be careful about how those things play together. But there is a complete suite of color correction and color management and color grading tools. Composites, we looked at merging. There's also dissolving, which is kind of the opposite. Effects, duplicate, highlight, hotspot, rays, shadows, trails, generators, backgrounds, day sky, fast noise, Mandelbrot, plasma, our text plus. A media loader, we can bring in footage or media from other places. Media in is typically the footage that we're working with. Now, all I did here, let's talk about media in for a moment. I'm just gonna, actually, let's do it this way. So where I just created this Fusion composition, right? And that overlays very nicely onto something like this. But sometimes we need to work directly with the footage. So I don't want to work with the whole thing. I'm just going to hit Command B to use the blade tool. And if I go from here into Fusion, we're going to see things a little bit different. Now I actually see my footage in here, and my media in is that footage I was working with. Now I can bring that footage in directly from the media pool, and if I take and I just drag footage in here, that will become a media in. So there's different ways of having that media in, because sometimes I need to take this, maybe I want to track something in here and add motion tracking or text that follows me around. Well, that's probably a good idea. Let's do that. Since we're doing an introduction to Fusion, a lot of people want to, this is a very common thing that people want to do. So as long as we're in here, let's just do something really quick here. So I'm going to go to my effects. I'm going to go to a tracker. This is going to bring up this tracking tool. Up in the corner here, we see this tracking node type of thing here. And I'm going to position that over that logo right there. And we have these two boxes. This first inside box is what is the thing that I want to look at for the tracking. The outside box is where should Fusion expect it to be from frame to frame. We do need to go kind of to the beginning of our section here, and we see as I moved, that logo is not where it was before. So I'm just going to position this over here. So we're at the beginning of our little clip. We have a tracker in place over that logo, and we're going to say track forward. Now you can see there on the screen that it's tracking that logo. This is going to be used here in just a moment when we add some text that's going to move with the logo. So this doesn't take too long on the M1 systems. On my previous machines, this took forever. So as much as I wanted to do more of this, I just didn't do it because it was such a pain in the butt. All right, our render is completed. Took 30 seconds. And in here, I'm going to add some text. So I've got my text node here, and I'm just going to put Carrie Garrison, and let's see how that looks on the screen there. All right, we'll position it once we get things in place here, but I'm going to connect that text to that tracker, and nothing has happened yet. It's not showing it. So from our tracker, we need to tell it, well, what do you want to do? You have this tracking data and you have this input from the text, but what is it that you want to do? So we're going to go to our operation. See, operation is none, and I'm going to do a match move. Okay, now we've got the text on the screen, and it's definitely not where we want. So I'm going to go ahead and select the text. We'll change the size, and we'll grab our transform handles, and we'll just put it into place. Okay, let's see what happens. Well, we're at the beginning of our clip here, and let's hit play. So now my name is tracking along with that logo there. All right, so what did we do today? We created an animated logo, and we showed some motion tracking for text. Two things that people use Fusion for a lot. Now, granted, as I said, you can do all kinds of things up to complete Hollywood-style special effects in here, CGI compositing, whatever your brain can think of, you can do here in Resolve with Fusion. But the two things I wanted to show you here, titles, which are very cool to do because you can do all kinds of cool things with 3D shapes and textures and all kinds of cool things with titles, and motion tracking of text, which is something I use a lot and a lot of people want to know how to do. And you can see it's really, really easy in here. Well, I hope you liked this introduction to Fusion. As you can see, there's a ton of things you can do, and we just did some super, super basic things today. We did that animated title, and we did some motion tracked text. Two things that a lot of people want to do, and those are probably the two things that I do the most of in Fusion. But Fusion is extremely powerful. You can do complete Hollywood special effects in here if you know what you're doing and you develop the skill set for it. That's way beyond my abilities. I can't do crazy fake flames and all kinds of cool stuff. But what I do use Fusion for is a lot of stuff like this, which a lot of people don't even realize it can do. And I wanted to show it to you so you could kind of get a feel for what Fusion is all about and how you can use it in your own projects. Because adding things like that, some really cool titles or track text, things like that can really up the production value of your videos. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you had any comments, feedback, or questions, please use the comments below. I always reply to them. I try my best to stay on top of all the comments because I really want you guys to learn what this stuff is all about. So thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Kerry with Filmmaker Central, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.